Rejoice, barbarian horde, for your main man is amongst you. Before I start this video, my condolences to Dim Boys, to the family of the Briscoe brothers, a great ROH tag team. Jay Briscoe passed away tragically in a car accident recently, and just wanted to say on behalf of myself and the barbarian horde to the Briscoes and their family, condolences. And certainly I'd like to shit on the people at Time Warner that kept them off the TV for their politically correct nonsense, for their foolishness, stealing money from a man's hands, stealing money from a family. And I hope you get fired, and I hope those names are put out there, and I hope people run by and slap you in your gouye and throw you to the ground and maybe just crack one off on you, because that's really what you deserve deep down inside life. Stealing money from a man who got a family, a man who has something. And I certainly definitely throw my voice into the uproar of fans of wrestling to say, Time Warner, get on there and help the Briscoes. Go on there. I think there's the crowd funding for money for Jay Briscoe, the former ROH world champion, for his family who he left behind. And I certainly say, Tom Warner, you should drop $1 million in there to repent for the sins you have created in your political correct nonsense, and allowing bitch ass people to have power, which certainly should not have such things. And that's disgusting. We talked about with Wizards of the Coast, Time Warner on there too. You've been found out, you've been looked at, and you should be slapped in the mouth. Fantastic wrestlers who added joy to people's lives, and you kept that off TV. You kept joy from existing. Shit on you for that. And I hope the fucking ghost of Stan Hansen, though he is not dead, might lariat you and learn about what sounds your neck will make for your insolence. Certainly, definitely professional wrestling. Tom Warner, after the merger, insipid, disgusting, hideous, ridiculous, revolting, pathetic, bitch ass, and of course, in need of the fucking spirits of the Road Warriors themselves to run wild on them. Each and every person has ever been employed by them in any sort of corporate capacity. I don't care if you're making the beans in the line in the line, Jack. You're gonna have to pay and take the Road Warriors double shoulder attack. So yeah, I'm definitely not a fan of them for what nonsense have inflicted since the fall of WCW and before that upon the wrestling industry, which anyone who watches my videos know I'm quite about. But let's talk about another industry that I'm about, and that's the RPG industry. And we're going to talk about right now how to take classes, a lot of classes people love in the 3.5 world, Warlock, Sorcerer. And let's talk about today the Hexblade, a class that appears in 3.5. First, there's no analog to this in AD&D, but a class you could quite easily change over. And I actually, for you people, sat down for like an hour, maybe 40 minutes, and wrote down some stuff for you, talking about this class, talking about what I think about this class here, and how to change it over. So I even went into formatting, things that, for my games, I'm certainly not really going to bother with, but Hexblade AD&D 2nd edition. Obviously, you could use this for 1st edition as well, but I think the classes in a lot of ways are a bit cleaner, a bit smoother in AD&D 2nd edition, and that's really, technically I started with 1st, but really I started playing with 2nd, so that's sort of my nostalgia piece and why I'm going to go to that over someone that's, say, maybe 5 years older than me with the 1st edition. So when we look at a class layout, I'm looking at Rangers, I'm looking at Paladins. Let's talk about ability requirements right off the bat. First of all, this is a warrior class. It is a subclass of a fighter. And the ability requirements. Strength 12, Constitution 11, Intelligence 9, Charisma 15 to play a Hexblade. Now, prime requisites are going to be Strength and Charisma. If you have a 16 or better in both, not just one, but both of those abilities, you would be eligible for a 10% experience point bonus to all the experience points that you acquire. Now, race is allowed. It's just going to be human and half-elf. In AD&D, it was very restrictive on the classes you could play. And this is a class that would not be allowed for multi-classing in the standard application. Of course, you could take everything, this big set here, and modify it to however you want to do things. I'm putting it right down the line. You do what you want to do. Alignment restrictions, any non-good, a neutral character or an evil character only of any lawful, neutral, or chaotic alignment, but no lawful good, neutral good, or chaotic good. These are people who are inherently connected to things of misfortune, Beshaba or to infernal aspects, demonic aspects, whatever sort of darkness. There's darkness in their shadow. The XP table that we're going to use is Paladin Ranger, not the fighter table. Paladin Ranger table a little bit harder. Of course, as per this, they're only going to receive 9 hit dice, 3 hit points per level above that. So they're going to be using warrior saving throws and warrior thacos. So that means it starts at 20 at first level, and then every level after that it goes down by 1. Weapon proficiencies are as a warrior. Non-weapon proficiencies are general, warrior, and wizard. They are a class very akin to a wizard. They are a very occult-based class. They are steeped in mysticism. You know, you certainly have that going on. Now let's talk about first level. Now in 3.5 they have the Hexblade Curse, really the defining feature of the class. Now in this edition, there is no swift actions, no quick actions, no free actions, nothing like that in the fashion that there is in 3.5. However, I say simply just to go ahead and integrate that. You could make it cost a full action, but at that point you would need to make the ability stronger, more times a day, something like that, because it otherwise is kind of weak, and it's such a strong feature to why you're stripping other portions of the class away, that I think that needs to be there. So first level, Hexblade Curse, range 60 feet, save versus spell to negate. If the saving throw fails, the target, and I would say that you may want to put some type of limits on this. You might say it doesn't affect an ooze or an undead or a construct, but you should sort of choose just how you want to make that. But I would say typical living things, whether it's a giant or a dragon or a hobgoblin, whatever, certainly should be affected. But that's a -2 penalty on attack rolls, on saving throw rolls, on proficiency check rolls, on ability checks, and weapon damage rolls. I would say with a minimum on the die of 1. You could get at least 1 on your die, and that's for an entire hour. So that's to all of those. You take it to all of them, not just one category. So it's a crippling thing to any individual that suffers that. Now, at first level, you can only do that once per day. And if you make your first saving throw, you cannot be targeted by the same Hexblade for an entire day or for 24 hours, however you want to write that down. Abilities such as Remove Curse, similar abilities would negate the effects if they're on you as soon as that spell is cast successfully. And using this ability, I'm a big proponent of the rule in here, speed factor. So using this, I would add 1 in that round that the Hexblade uses it to indicate that some degree of time a second, I would add 1 to the speed factor. I'd penalize the Hexblade by 1 to the speed factor. So that is a way to help add on the fact that even though you're giving them that, basically it's a free action, it's still costing you some type of game currency, which I think in this edition is good because it's a very powerful ability to add in. And if you found the ability was overall too powerful from the downgrade, you could certainly change the penalty from a -2 to a -1 to fit your taste. An easy adjustment there, having the power, and then as it continues to increase, lowering it from say -1 to -2 to -4 or what have you. An additional, you can take any weapon proficiency allowable to a fighter, and you can use any type of armor up to, they don't really have chain shirts in this, but you can easily add those in, add an armor class of 4 instead of 5 for chainmail, and allow them to be able to utilize their special abilities in that. I would say any special ability beyond that, either if you're using armor heavier than that, say armor chainmail to plate, whatever, it either just doesn't work or you just start putting really crushingly high percentages, like 50% chance your abilities don't work, 70% chance as it goes up in the armor, 98% chance, what have you. You could make a table like that, or you could just simply say it's just not going to work. Just like a wizard, you just can't cast or utilize these abilities. And that goes to a full-on hit ability like the Hexblade's Curse or the static abilities that we'll get into later for the Hexblade, and just sort of take that all away and just make them a weaker fighter. But I would say that the character is basically only capable of using or proficient in anything up to a chain shirt if you want to use that, or to say if you're not, studded leather armor. Just make it padded leather and studded leather. You could certainly go that route as well. Maybe restricting them back a little bit, punishing their armor class overall, as the character has a good bit of oomph, and I think it's pretty strong either way. In addition, they cannot use shields. They don't know how to use shields. And if they do use a shield, so they're just like a thief or a wizard, they don't know how to use a shield. If they somehow gain the ability to use a shield later, a shield would prevent them from using Hexblade Curse, for example. You need a free hand to do that. So you got a weapon, a one-handed weapon in one hand. So that would be another thing. You couldn't be using two-handed swords, quarter staves, a two-handed bastard sword, a claymore, whatever you want to use for a two-handed weapon, two-handed spear, just one-handed weapons, a short sword, for example, or a one-handed battle axe, that sort of thing, while you're utilizing the other hand. So they're sort of keeping one hand free for those purposes. Now, at third level, and I picked third level for these abilities because a lot of classes, that's where we start to see things are coming in, right? For example, a paladin gains the turn ability when he reaches third level. We don't see a lot of classes really getting stuff at second level. Either have it at first or they wait to third to get it. Druids also get some stuff at third level as well. So instead of going with second level, I pushed it back to third. Also pushing the power overall of the class down just a touch by denying him these sort of abilities until they get to third level. Now, you could furthermore push a few of these things I'm going to talk about down until they get the ability to utilize spells. And I'll talk about when they get that and how they get that as we go up in the levels. However, I think allowing the class some occultism, some magic, some arcana right from the very, very early stages of the game, at third level, overall gives you a better advantage, and it makes use of things like scrolls. So we're giving them the wizard's ability to use scrolls, but only from the scrolls, only from what they could cast as a hexblade. And I'll get into how I did that when we get to magic. So that's going to be the caveat of what I'm saying they can use. It's going to have a caveat of what they are actually able to cast later. But overall, just for now, we'll talk about they can use wizard scrolls. They can cast from wizard scrolls. They can use wands, staves, wands, and miscellaneous magic items as a wizard with the same caveat. Now, they can also cast 3 times a day, detect magic, and 3 times a day read magic, which read magic is going to be needed to be able to cast off the scrolls. They're going to need to read the scroll previously to unlock the scroll, and then they can cast from that scroll. Obviously, if they've just gotten a hold of it, they can't even read it. They don't know what it does until they use read magic on the scroll. So that's going to allow them some access to magic, and it's going to steep them in a way to make them a sort of fighter wizard hybrid with this weird negative entropic ability besides that. At third level, in 3.5, they have 2 abilities, metal and what is the other one? Arcane resistance, I think. So I sort of smashed those into one. Metal is a little bit difficult to fully transition into this edition. So get rid of that. Giving them a saving throw bonus as a saving throw bonus very similar to the dwarf or gnome racial bonus. So, but it's going to work this way. Instead, we're using charisma, not constitution, but charisma. So your charisma bonus for every 3.5 points of charisma, say if you had a charisma of 4, and it's rounded down, right? If you had a charisma of 4, you would get a +1 to this. A charisma of 7 would give you a +2. A charisma of 14, and you have to have a 14. A 13 wouldn't do it for you, but a 14, a +4, and then it also, of course, an 18, because you can't have a 7.5. But an 18 charisma would give you a +5. And somehow, if you could get a charisma of, 21, you would have a +6 bonus to your saving throws versus spells, versus rods, staves, wands, and versus death magic, which is extremely powerful. And it gives you an advantage for having high charisma. One of the strong criticisms often of AD&D is charisma is such a dump stat. And if you're not using hordes of henchmen, hordes of hirelings, the mere reaction adjustment can often seem like something very paltry to the player that has high charisma versus the player that's like, pia, 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 I got an 1827 strength, right? That guy's kicking ass and you're seeing bonuses. That guy with the high dexterity is moving out of everything. That guy with the high hit points. That guy with the high intelligence as a magic user. He can learn all the spells. He can know all the spells. The guy with the high wisdom as a cleric. Man, look at all these extra spell slots he has. But the charisma just kind of sits there like, And I love charisma. You know I love charisma. So let's incentivize charisma. Let's give him some function to the form, and I think that that is going to work perfectly fine. Remember, overall, the stat doesn't have any generic meat to it. It's not like I'm a thief and I get all this wonderful stuff from dexterity, plus it's pumping up all my thieving skills. Oh, that's great. You know, I'm a fighter. I'm going to just be in there blasted old people with this high strength, plus I get, you know, all these other bonuses from being able to carry things, being able to pick things up, that sort of thing, you know, as well. So I think it's perfectly fine to have that right there. And it's at third level. At fourth level, they'll have the ability to summon familiar with no spell components needed. I think it's 1,000 gold pieces worth of herbs to summon a familiar, and that's very hefty, very cost prohibitive to a character at a low level. So at fourth level, you certainly give them a familiar, and certainly depending on alignment, it may be an imp, it may be a quasit, whatever you want to do as a game master. And certainly things like that really pump a character's power level up. So think about that as a game master. But I always like to give something interesting or unique. And if a player's like, I want to really start with this, okay, whatever. But if you trust me and sit with me and let me work and wait and think until I got it in the story, it's going to work out better for you in the long run. And by the time fourth level's there, you can give them something good. And that's, you know, right where they have it in 3.5, but is also connected. It's the same level as a paladin would get a warhorse at fourth level. So I think that's a wonderful time to give it to them, and a wonderful time to see. To me, a paladin's warhorse. I'm giving you something cool. You might get a griffin. You might get a hippogriffin. You might get a pegasus. You might get a unicorn. You might get a fucking manticore. You might get a nightmare, depending on what kind of paladin you are and what your deal is. But I don't really just a horse patterned after Sleipnir. I gave someone one time as a paladin, 8-legged Sleipnir like horse. So I'm going to give you something cool. I want you to be invested. I want you to fun. I want you to like that. And I think the same thing with a familiar. I think you should put a little funk in a familiar, not just I'm a toad that you crawl in your butthole if you're not paying attention. And fuck all that stupid bullshit, right? Give them something cool, And it doesn't have to be something broken like an imp. Just put some time in it. Put some effort in it. Make it mean something, right? And the player is going to appreciate that, respect that, and is going to enjoy it more. All right. So at 7th level, the Hexblade will gain Hexblade's Curse, Hexblade's Greater Hexblade Curse, excuse me. So the penalty will turn to -4 instead of a -2 to everything we said before. Penalty on attacks, on saves, on proficiency checks, ability checks, and weapon damage rolls. It's going to go to -4. Now that's very, very, very strong, particularly in this edition where the bonuses aren't as good. You could also, if that seemed too strong, maybe you started at -2 and then this is -3. Or maybe you started that one at -1 and this is -2. Because you can play with these things. You can make them a little bit different. And again, because you're giving them an ability that they're able to do in addition to whatever they're doing in that round. It doesn't necessarily have to be world breaking. But again, it does have a saving throw versus spells. And that can definitely stuff it up. And if it's such a major part of the class, I don't see any reason you can't give them a little bit. It really isn't going to break your game. And again, like the bonus to damage, it's just for me, the way I read this, it's only to the die roll. The way I would do it, only to the die roll. So if you have a monster that does a D8 and you rolled a 3, well, he's still doing 1 point of damage. Plus, if he has strength bonuses or whatever, give him that too on top of it. Now at 8th level, I give them their spells, and I use a spell. I'm going to use a spell system very similar to the chart table 17 on page 28 of the player's handbook, of the first printing of it, except for starting at 8th level. This table right here starts at 9th level. Bump it down 1 level, give it to them at 8th, I think. Again, you could just use this at 9th if you wanted to. I think 9th is a little bit late, but I would put them at 8th, and I would progress the table up. And of course, at 20th level, it's just the same as it is at 19th. But I think that's perfectly fine. Or you could hold their last 3 to gain 3 at 4th level. You could hold that back. Now, in addition to this, what I do, and you know what? Check that. What I would do. Let me recant that. I would use this table exactly as it is, but at 8th level, I would give you 0 spells at 1st level, because we're also going to use charisma with the wisdom table. with table 5, wisdom. As you can see right there, it talks about additional spells for high wisdom. I would use that table, but basically transfer the word wisdom to the word charisma. So if you had a 13 charisma, you would get 1 extra first level spell. 14 charisma, 1 extra 13. 14 charisma, 2 extra first level spells, and so on and so forth. So I think that's a great way to get more value out of the charisma. Give them a little bit of ability to start catching up, and it's not until 8th level. And even if you had, say, an 18 charisma, you would only be able to cast 2 first level spells at 8th level. Certainly not groundbreaking, and you're certainly going to have to cast those spells. However, you're going to be able to cast those spells up into your light armor, so your chain shirt or studded leather, depending on how you want to go. If you want to add in light a chain shirt in addition to, and that's something that I myself have done. I have added chain shirts, habergeons, I'm going to say the name is, for that type of armor into this edition. It's real armor. I don't see any reason that you can't have that in this game. So in addition, you will gain at 12th level Aura of Unluck. An Aura of Unluck, what it does is it gives you a 20% chance for melee or ranged attacks to miss. So if I roll and I hit your armor class, and you would say, oh, hold on, and then you would roll almost like a magic resistance in this edition. So you would roll 20 from alt 1 to 20. And if it hits, then you are not hit. And that would last. The way in 3.5 it worked to give you 3 rounds plus 1 point if for any positive charisma bonus that your character had, right? Now in this edition, the way I have it put down is the same way, 1 point per 3.5 points of your charisma to make it again stat contingent and to get more value out of charisma. So you get 1 round per that, and I would give you 1 extra round on top of that. So let's say that you had a charisma of 14, that would give you 4 rounds plus 1 round. Or you could say, even if you say that's too high, then take the plus 1 rounds away. I think that would work fine. Additionally, my thoughts would be, if you found it to be too oppressive, make it 20% chance for melee or ranged attack to miss from the first attack that any opponent gives you, and then half it and make it a 10% chance for any attack beyond the first attack they launch. But try it at 20% and see how that works for you. Now, you would add a 3. Well, you can. This is ability you can use for free. Again, that's what's really powerful about this. You just boom and you turn it on. I would say you cannot use your curse and this ability in the same. I would, basically create yourself a column for swift actions and allow them to do one or another per turn. Now with the Aura of Unluck, I would add the round you're operating it, I would add 3 to your speed factor for that round only. And I think that is a good compensation, a good way to make it just a bit impactful. The fact that you are doing something, the fact that it is not fully taking up your round, but it adds to your round in a way, and overall pushes the power of it down ever so slightly by pushing you further back in the round. That may let a 3 certainly may allow some monsters to get ahead of you at times, be able to blast at you before you even get it off. And again, if it didn't work for you, you can certainly push it down just a little bit, or alternatively, you could say maybe extend the duration of it and make it cost a round. So it's something you would use more like a buff spell, like a bless or something like that, blur, something of that nature that you wanted to use maybe before you got into combat, or in the middle of combat, you're like, okay, I'm just going to drop it and waste a whole round, So it's a good way to give a little bit of arcanicism and occultism to a character that is still a fighter. And you can only do that once a day at 12th level. At 16th level, you can do it twice a day. And at 20th level, you can do it 3 times a day. Not really a big deal. If you're 20th level, this really is certainly not something that's going to break the bank. However, it certainly may be something that helps you get to 20th level. And at 19th level, the character gains Dire Hexblade Curse, for your curse would increase from a -4 to a -6 to all of the aforementioned abilities. And conversely, if this seemed too daunting, you can either A, make it take a full action to do, or B, you can make it -1, -2, -3, or -1, -2, -4, depending if you wanted to just add 1 or if you wanted to double it each time. And that would bring it down significantly. As bonuses aren't quite as high in AD&D as they are in 3.5. Overall, I have played with Hexblades in 3.5. I don't find them to be a particularly strong class. I don't think that they're particularly gimped either, but I know Dragon Magazine did create an issue that pushed sort of a redo for them to make them powerful. It was called a fix or something along those lines for it. I'm well aware because a Hexblade player of mine went and purchased the magazine. He was like, see, this guy should be more powerful. My character's too weak. I said, nah, son. It made him play the character the way it was. But let me know what you think about that. And if you think this is an interesting idea or a good idea in the comments below. But when you get to 8th level, we talked about what you get. The way I decided to do them is 8th level, 0 first level spells, and then use the paladin table. But you still have to learn all your spells the same way a wizard does, from scrolls, from captured spell books, from spells, that are carved in the crumbling ruin of some ancient mausoleum or temple or what have you, being tutored, whatever. And it's a great way to take money off your character. It's a great way to plant extra treasure in a game, or just treasure in a game that is not really anything that's counting against you, because all you're doing is really letting them get their class abilities on. But they're happy to get those scrolls. They're happy to get that. And it is such a wonderful thing when you have a scroll, say you're 3rd level, in a case like this, right? You might be able to get a 2nd level scroll that you really treasure. You really want to have that spell. But many, many levels before that, you have to actually burn the spell, because there's a reason you guys might not make it. It might save another player's life, or maybe it will. And you're like, oh God, am I ever going to get that again? And that's really a fantastic thing to do. So you're still going to have to learn those spells. And that's off intelligence. And the character is charisma based, but we're bringing intelligence into it. Remember before we mentioned intelligence of 9 as part of the requirement to be able to play this class. So just like a wizard, instead of making it easy and throwing them a charisma, it makes no sense for that to be charisma based. You are an occultist, you are a scholar, you do have a need for intelligence with this class. So over here on table 4, we can see chance to learn spell. So that's going to incentivize the character to try to be above a 9. And you have to have a 9 in the class, because you cannot learn spells if you have intelligence below a 9, which is the minimum to play a wizard. So you're still going to have to try to learn those spells. The same thing with the max number of spells per level. And needing strength and needing charisma, you may not have the highest intelligence score. So that's going to penalize you. That's going to make these spells harder to learn. And you're going to have to acquire them, and you're going to have to try to learn them. And you only get 1 shot per level. In your 8th level, you can try to learn, and then it will be till 9th level that you can try to learn a 1st level spell again, and you can't learn a spell until you're at that level. You can't put spells in your spell book that are higher level than your character can cast. At least that's the way I've always done it. So the higher intelligence, the more max spells or level you can learn, and the higher your chance to learn spells. The spell level portion is irrelevant, because they're tapping out at 4th level, which is what 9 gives you anyway. So that part's irrelevant. You could alternatively maybe change that to make that a little bit harder. Maybe you could say half it and say, well, to get this 4th level spell, you're going to need a 16 intelligence. So if you have that, or you could say half rounded up to make them at least have a 14 intelligence to learn 4th level spells. Maybe certainly something you could do as well, depending on where you saw the need of the character class. Alternatively, you could make their intelligence requirements a little higher. I don't think so, though. I think it needs to be at a 9, where you're going to have the same interface as a wizard. Why you would need a higher level intelligence than a wizard, I don't know. But so there's a reason that I included that limitation to them, as that is a very standard part of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Now, let's talk about what they can actually learn. I looked at the list in 3.5, and I didn't take every spell from it, but I kind of broke it down to what appeared to be the quintessentials for having the feeling of the class, not the same spell list. Now, they have actual spell lists they could learn, and you could carefully sort of procure a spell list the class could learn. But if we look at rangers can only learn from the plant and animal sphere, and paladins, I think they have maybe 4 spheres they can learn from. So these other classes, the druid fighter, which is the ranger, and the cleric fighter, which is the paladin, and this, you are the role of the fighter wizard. With all these are heavy on the fighter and lower on the other portion, right? So the paladin can only learn Oh, here we go. The paladin can only learn combat, divination, healing, and protective spheres. So that's all you can learn. I think the sphere is called protection, but it says protective spheres here. Anyway, what I decided was they can only learn from half of the schools, 4 of the schools of magic, and you could trim that down to 2 if you wanted to. I think you want to keep it better than 1 to give them some diversity into their magic to make it less, samey. But I went with abjuration, illusion, necromantic, and enchantment, and I think that gives them a very good grouping. Necromantic, obviously viewed as the evil magic. Enchantment viewed as kind of a borderline evil magic. Illusion, so chaotic, so reckless, and really kind of in feeling with some of the other abilities of the class. So I think that's fantastic. And abjuration, very great for the fighter side. And a lot of the things I saw in the 3.5 book were very similar to that. They had an abjuration, either abjuration spells or certainly a feel of that. You're trying to be protective for yourself, and just like the sort of aura they have, I think that could be an excellent way to kind of give them something different that maybe someone else might not necessarily think about, and I think that will certainly be very helpful to them. In addition, as another hindrance, other than their familiar, I put them down with no follower tables. And I think they're strong enough without that. And I don't think a Hexblade necessarily would be strong to attract people. But if they were, I would suggest a table. After all, they can already get henchmen. They're going to have a good charisma score. It's got to be 15. So they're going to attract some henchmen. They're going to be able to hire hirelings if you're doing that style of gaming. So what the fighter gets for building a keep, or what the ranger gets, that stuff I don't think is really needed for this character. He's got henchmen, plus he's got a familiar. I think that's probably enough for him. You may want to give him tieflings. I don't call him the other thing. I call him tieflings because God knows that name's just bad enough. The other one, Jesus. So that's my thoughts. Here's my idea. Here's putting a class together. I think this has been downgraded fairly decently in power from the 3.5. They gave you a lot of bonus feats. It gave you a lot of additional feats. We pushed the magic from 4th level all the way back to 8th. And even at 8th, it's really just starting. I think that you could certainly make a few trims to what I've suggested. But I think that this would run perfectly fine in your game, and I think in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, a lot of people would love to play a Hexblade. You might love to play one yourself. I think it's a fantastic class. I think it oozes with flavor. I think it's very interesting. I think the fact that it doesn't have to just exclusively be evil, but it's simply not good, which is something different. And we saw Paladins lawful good, Rangers lawful good, neutral good, or chaotic good only. And AD&D, there are only those alignments. So why not put something that has a different flavor, a darker edge, but not, I'm an anti-paladin. They're not that. They're just darker. They make a fantastic anti-hero. They can make a very interesting character. And I've had one in my game that was a fantastic player that played in my game. And I've seen him before. And I think that you'll probably really enjoy this class if you add it into your game. And like I said, I've given you what I think is perfectly fine, and then I've given you some ways to dumb it down and make it even a little bit weaker. Write in the comments below, Barbarian Horde, what you think. Make sure to hit the bell. I guess a lot of people had put videos a long time, hadn't done that when that nonsense was jabbering on along. A lot of my friends tell me they weren't getting the videos or seeing the videos either, and they were definitely subscribed. So they said, hey, make sure you mention hit the bell, whatever, and otherwise share the video or unsubscribe, whatever the fuck you want to do. I don't really care. I'm just over here rambling and jabbering and putting down some videos. Hopefully you get a good laugh out of them. All right, guys, have a good one.